I have loads of questions. I realise from the production and commissioning point of view, I work with writers all the time and don't know the ins and outs of an awful lot of your careers. So, starting with Tiwa, who I think is, of the three of you, is the most recent to call yourself a writer and give up your day job. I wanted to know, starting with Tiwa and from the rest of you, what was the point at which you decided to make the jump and become a writer and kind of call yourself a writer and have that as your full-time job?
Yeah, I think I always really enjoyed writing from when I was really young, from poems, short stories and plays. But yeah, I think it was the moment when COVID happened in the pandemic and I got furloughed and I actually had the time to write a full thing, give it my all. And then that was the moment when I started applying for different competitions and stuff. And I think it was from when I did the Felix Dexter with BBC, I was like, wow, this is something I think I can really just dive into. And luckily, from the money I got from that, I was able to go into full-time.
And how about you, Lydia? When did you take the plunge?
It happened really, really suddenly. So I had finished a master's in which I'd written a full-length play for, and then applied for loads of jobs in London, admin sort of jobs. Didn't get any of them. Had to move back home with my parents. Was working customer service jobs, and had this really, really rough year where I was just rejected by every scheme going, and sent loads of emails to agents, and just got completely blanked. And then all of a sudden, this full-length play that I'd written on my uni course, I submitted it to the BBC Writers Academy and got through their process, and then suddenly I was moving to London for 12 weeks. I was getting paid to train, and then from then, at the time the BBC Writers Academy had connections with the 3 soaps, Holby, Casualty and EastEnders. So for that year I wrote 1 episode of each of them, and then from that point I've sort of been expecting it to end, and so far, touch wood, it hasn't. Which is nice.
It's reassuring that, having worked at BBC, that both of you had schemes that kind of made it financially viable. That's really nice to know. How about you, Charlie?
I also did a scheme that made it very financially viable for the year I was on the scheme, which was the BBC Audio Bursary. I can't remember if that's the real name for it, something like that. But I think, so for me, the big step was I was trying to be kind of because I'm all comedy. Actually, it'd be really interesting. Am I allowed to ask? Are there people who feel they're comedy writers? Okay, that's fine. Otherwise, I'll be writing in general. So I was kind of performing and trying to be a stand-up, and then I started directing. So I directed a comics live Edinburgh show, a comic called Olga Koch, and her show got picked up to be turned into a radio special, a Sunday half-hour special. And so I co-wrote that with her. And really, for me, all the writing spiraled out of that. It was that was more the moment that I think even got me on the bursary and got me in front of people. But it was that someone had wanted to take her, and then I was there too. So yeah. I guess from then.
And I think all 3 of you studied. Did you all study in writing or all different things?
I was drama school for acting. Yeah.
So, and I think as we're in a university, there are probably some students in the audience. Are there things that you picked up from university or things that you would take advantage of at university, maybe that aren't to do with your course or the sort of academic side, but are there things that you would particularly recommend to people who are still studying to take advantage of or do more of whilst you're at uni before you go out into having to find work?
Well, I didn't. So when I wrote my first play whilst I was at uni, and I didn't have to pay for my friends to read it. So that was really nice because I could just use them. And because, we were fresh actors, they were so happy to spend our lunch times or break times just R&Ding it with me. So that's something I definitely took advantage of.
How about you two?
So I took a bit of a roundabout route. So I don't have a BA degree. I kind of dropped out of university after 6 weeks and then took 3 gap years, which my parents were really pleased about, because I'm from Hull and it was while Hull was City of Culture, so I was I just really want to make the most of this opportunity, and then did the Masters. But I'd say the big thing that I felt was important was just about making the most of the opportunities in the city that you're in while you're in it. So, and that doesn't, obviously for me that was London, but also you wouldn't necessarily think of Hull as a super creative city, but actually as a student in Hull, you can kind of look at who are the core theatre companies, what opportunities are Hull Truck Theatre doing, likewise here, what opportunities are Leeds Playhouse doing. And so doing all of the drama stock stuff, which is so incredible, and you've got the resources to make work that you won't have when you leave, but then also just trying to introduce yourself to the professional industry in the city as well, because in my experience, people are so very few people actually do that while they're at uni because they're so busy, and actually when people do, theatres and theatre companies are so excited to support you and give you advice and stuff like that.
Nice. And did you discover comedy, or is that why you got into comedy at uni?
I was in a sketch group at university, and I started doing improv, which I don't know if is a thing that is available to people, but I think improv is really an interesting way to learn to write, actually, particularly if you want to write comedy. I really recommend it, even if you don't want to be a performer. And so I was in a sketch group, I did improv, I did some stand-up. I would say the main thing, if you are literally in a university or an institution, is just rinse their resources. But I think even if you're not part of a university and you live in a place and you can find libraries or theatre companies or anyone who owns a camera, people have camera kit. Try and figure out who owns camera kit. This is a beautiful space, but where there are spaces where you can put stuff on. And I guess some of those institutions facilitate it, so it's easier for you to meet other people you want to work with or people who have similar interests. But even I would say my top tip for that is go and look at places where people who you actually need are, rather than people who are exactly like you. So, for example, I live in London, but these kind of programs exist all over. There's a BFI program, right, where people go to the BFI because they want to be filmmakers. And if you're a writer, it's a really good idea to meet someone who knows how to use a camera or who wants to be a filmmaker or does those things. So I'd say even be smart in terms of resource stealing and borrowing around looking for other people who can help you do the thing you want to do without being exactly the same thing.
Kind of crew up.
Yeah. But my educational background is not in writing at all, and I don't think it's ever been an issue. And I think it's nice to know about other things too.
Yeah, my degree bears has no bearing on what I do now either. So then, moving along from university, all of you have done. I think you've covered every base in terms of early development and bursaries and training programs. Are there things or any advice about what you should have prepared for to be able to be ready to apply for those sort of opportunities and sort of tips of getting onto those sort of schemes?
I think it's really great if you could have someone who's maybe a few steps ahead of you in terms of in terms of knowing what this industry is about or about writing. Because I think when I wrote my first script, there was someone that I was constantly sending it to, in terms of help.
You work with a mentor, is that
yes,
right?
Yeah. So I was so fortunate to find a mentor, and he very much helped me, especially at the beginning. And then I would also say that once you have your baby, I think it's so normal to focus just solely on that baby, but also start thinking of new ideas as well, because not all producers are going to love your baby. So you need to have other ideas so that when they say, oh, this is great, but what other things do you have? And when I first started, I didn't have other ideas, so it was a little bit awkward. So that's another piece of advice I'd give to new writers. Definitely think of other things as well.
Yeah, definitely. I think with the schemes, which was touched on in the last talk, is if you've got anyone at all, my mum reads most of my work, but if you've got anyone at all to give you feedback so that you're not sending in the first draft, that is really useful because I did the BBC Writers Academy, and now I read for the BBC Writers Academy, and it does make a difference when you just see that an idea you can see some great ideas in principle that just haven't quite been fully mined and explored, and the more drafts you do, probably the more you'll find that. And then in terms of getting onto the schemes, I'd say just apply, and the year that I got accepted for the BBC Writers Academy, I submitted a script, the same script for the BBC Writers Room, and didn't get anywhere with it. Because each of those schemes look for a different thing. So I think, I guess what had happened was at the time the BBC Writers Academy was focused on soap operas, continuing dramas. So I said something that had good dialogue, but maybe it didn't have the epic story and voice for the BBC Drama Room programmes. So just be aware they're all looking for different things, and don't feel disheartened if you get rejected from one. and then also like just do. I think you go mad if like all you're focused on is getting onto those schemes. Like do as much of your own stuff as well that you're in control of, because then you'll enjoy writing, and then like those things hopefully will come. But yeah, there's so few of them that they can't just be your only focus.
Again, in this like steal what you can mentality, is particularly as a comedy writer, something that really helped me is look for these schemes, look for these shows that are open submission. So there used to be one called Newsjack. I think it has a new name now. But you need to use the application process for that scheme for yourself as a way to structure your approach to something. So Newsjack is a good example because it ran for 8 weeks. DMs are open, I think it's called now. It runs for 8 weeks, and you can submit gags and you can submit sketches every week. If you sit down every week and you write your 8 gags and you write your 1 sketch, which is the kind of thing you would need to be able to do if you were a professional comedy writer, then for 8 weeks you've done that and you've submitted it every time. So it's like the best case scenario from that scheme is that like you get invited into a writer's room, you get to go and do all that fun stuff. But the worst case scenario is that you've written 8 weeks of topical comedy. Maybe you've met some other people and made a little group where you write 8 weeks of topical comedy and you've learned something. So with these schemes, that sometimes I've been successful and sometimes I've not, I've been like, well, looking ahead to the calendar year of schemes, what's something that I would be interested in having a shot at, and how do I structure my work and my writing up to that scheme so I have something to put in that I'm like really proud of, that I think has a really good shot. And then it doesn't really matter if you get on the scheme or not, because you've written a script that you are really proud of, and there are loads of other things to do with it.
And it's also sort of almost first experience of writing to a brief to an extent as
completely,
well, like
and you're going to have to do that. If you're in comedy, you're just going to have to do that all the time.
Yeah.
So I think that's like a good lesson to learn and a good thing to move towards. But yeah, use all of them as a way to push your writing to a place where you feel comfortable with your writing and you're happy with what you're saying, which is the project of a lifetime, not the project of one scheme. And then I think you really can't lose. It doesn't matter if you're not on the scheme. Apply next year. I've got into loads of schemes on the second year. Sounds like you did as well. Next time.
And I think, as I say, like, as somebody who reads like the scripts for entries for those sort of things, you can get on people's radar without getting very far in the scheme.
It's completely true. It's not it's not a writing story, but I know a bunch of producers who worked on the BBC New Comedy Awards, which is for finding stand-ups, and what they have always said without fault to me about that is that they have spotted someone like you did in the final few rungs of this thing, and they've been like, I like that person, I like what that person's saying, and then that's the connection that has been of actual value. Winning the BBC New Comedy Award maybe is not super valuable versus a producer who really loves you and connects with you. So also go into these things with like a good attitude, and if you go and have an interview, have a really good interview and a good talk with someone, and even if you don't get on the scheme, say thank you to that person, because the further you get through your career, the more you meet the same 6 people over and over and over again. So like look for the things that are wins in things that feel like losses sometimes, I think.
Yeah, absolutely.
I was just going to say that with me, like when I first started writing, whenever I saw competition, I'd rush to apply. And I think also remember just to like take your time, that there is going to be another opportunity to apply, because for me, I'm the kind of person where I'd write my first draft, I'm like, oh my god, let me just send it out to everyone without just like letting it cement first. And I find that you send it to a producer and then they will always remember that. So you might think, oh my god, but I've got an even better draft now, but they're not going to read it again. So just take your time, you won't regret it.
And moving away from schemes onto actual writing for a living, where do you find, we'll start with you, Charlie, for comedy, where do you look for writing gigs, and how did you find maybe in the beginning and now?
So my time is split between gag writing, which I do for individual comedians. So I direct people's live comedy shows and I let people know I'm like available to do that, and I have a reputation that I've built up. But that, I really think that is one of the easiest ways in, is like find a stand-up or find a performer and be like, can I write something for you? They're all egomaniacs, so they'll probably say yes. So I write gags for comedians. Comedians then go on panel shows. I write gags for them on panel shows. Then often the production team will hire me to write for the panel show itself. So I write a lot of gags. I do some short form and like sketchy based work for places like everyone hates sketches and says they hate sketches, but it comes up every so often because it is like the only good new talent strand, really. So sometimes a sketch thing will emerge and I'll go and do that. And then I write 5 pages a day of a script I'm working on, and I consider that to be my job as a writer. Like, I almost consider everything else to be like day job or like work or something else. But I'm like, if I want to call myself a writer and I'm a writer, at some point in my day I gotta write 5 pages of a script. They can be the worst 5 pages
for the
ever.
thing that's
for the thing that I'm working on. If you write 5 pages a day, you've written your pilot in a week. You can write a pilot a week, you know what I mean? So I think like that is what I consider the writing work, and then everything else, it's nice that it's writing, but it's not the writing work. I don't know if that makes any sense.
Yeah. And how about you, Lydia? You write across different media as well, I guess. So
yeah, it's sort of different for each one, I think. Like, and it gets a bit murkier as you've sort of worked with people before. Say, like, I might have worked on a show and go, oh, I'd love to do another episode of that. So then I just send them a little email, a little nudge to let them know that I'd like to do that again. And then for like TV production stuff, I kind of obviously watch TV, then I kind of identify the production companies that are making the work that I want to make. So then I get my agent to send a script to them, but I'm guessing with a lot of them you could do it open submission as well. And then hopefully like get a meeting with them and then like chat to them about the stories that I'm interested in, and sort of hope that they're excited about that too. Also sometimes through my agent, there'll be like a production company who've got a story and then they're looking for somebody to write that. I still do open stuff as well, so like obviously BBC Writers' Room, it's like the reason I have Twitter, because a lot of stuff comes up on that. Theatre generally I find like you need to keep applying and submitting. There's less like kind of, oh, we know you, so we'll give you a commission. It definitely doesn't work like that. So just keeping abreast on all the different channels, really.
I think it's like at the moment I've been trying to find like a lot more writing rooms, because I really enjoy those, because I'm definitely really excited about developing my own work, but I find it can be quite boring and it drives me crazy sometimes being in my room all day doing that. So with the writers' rooms, you're in a room with like other writers and you're helping facilitate someone else's show, which is a lot less pressure as well. You're like, oh, maybe try this idea. Like that works. And also it's not as lonely because you're just like bouncing ideas with other people, and it's like a lot of fun. So I find that I've been doing those recently, but then like exactly what Charlie was saying, also have the discipline to like go back home and then go back to your own idea and try and pump that out.
I know we talked about writers' rooms a bit in the last one, but it's like there aren't a ton of writers' rooms either. I think you do a lot of kids stuff, don't you?
Yeah, so I just did a kids one, but now the one I just did was more of like a skins.
Ah, cool. So like the teeny. This is where I think writers' rooms fall. I think it's like completely correct and the right thing to do, but all the time people ask me how they can get into writers' rooms, and it's like there are not that many It's not that everyone is in a writers' room and you aren't.
I've never done one.
Yeah,
I'm just very interested in this. This sounds great.
No, and it's just starting, I feel, because it's definitely more of an American thing.
Yeah,
because we don't have as much funding here, unfortunately.
And in comedy, I think, in comedy in America it's standard, but over here less so. Tiger Aspect are really good. I'm relatively new to Tiger, and they
seem to be doing it.
Writers' rooms on pretty much everything. But across the board when I was at BBC, there's not a whole lot of them that happen. Have any of you written together? Have you found collaborators to write with?
I always write with other people.
Yeah.
I love writing with other people. I'm now hearing my philosophy and I'm like, this is shady, but writing with other people is the best way to steal other people's knowledge. So I am a huge advocate of not even having you don't need to be like, this is my writing partnership. I think that's all very serious and it doesn't need to happen. What I'll do is I'll always start with the goal of what I want to get out of something, and sometimes it's I want to learn how to write a thing, or I want to just practice being able to produce some volume, or I just really like a person and I'm I think it would be fun to spend some time with them and do some jokes with them, and then often I'll approach that person with a project idea. Again, flattery, would recommend. I love working with other people. I very often write with other people.
Yeah. Tiwa, you act and write, so do you find that both of those, I guess you might write roles for yourself. Does doing both forms sort of inform each other? Do you find it helpful doing both of those mediums?
Yeah, I think the acting helped with the writing for sure. And I think it helps. I find that it's easier for me to write dialogue and it just comes. Yeah, do you know what I mean? Because then if as an actor I'm reading it, it's not coming out naturally, then I know it's not working.
And Lydia, you write across theatre and audio and for screen. How do you find flipping between those different sort of writing styles? Or
So I really like it. I think it stops me like ever getting sick of one medium because I can always flip on to the next. But it's like I'm still like adjusting to it, definitely. Like the first time that I wrote a play after having done like a lot of TV, it was just loads of short scenes, and the minute anything dramatic happened, I flicked to the next scene, because that's kind of what you do in TV. And whereas theatre is all like very, very long scenes where you're kind of like getting to the real meat of the conversation. So that took a lot of adjusting. And even now, I'm redrafting a play, and like I'm just even working out like how much of it to write in a day, because when I'm writing an episode of EastEnders, I might do like 5-10 scenes in a day, and obviously if I do that to a play, it's going to be the worst play in the world. So just figuring out like the pace of the different mediums is something I'm still kind of grappling with. And
how do you, I guess you write with other people a lot, but especially when you're on your own, how do you find the motivation to write and discipline? And Charlie, you write in 5 a day. How, I guess if you've got into a pattern with it, is it sort of repetition? Or,
I think I love that, having written something so much, I just try and hold that feeling in my mind through the bit that is horrible. But actually, the more you write, the more you're trying to develop a process that you can fall back on for when you don't feel like doing it. I think that is the real goal, rather than like, I want to write a film or have a film made or something, is if you can focus on your short-term goal being like, I have a process where I know that if I get stuck, I can either move to a different project or take my walk around the block or I write scenes sometimes in not the, I don't write a thing through. If it's big, I'll just write all the scenes separately, because I just think, how can I trick my brain into just getting that like dopamine hit really fast so I don't have to get into, I don't really want to do this. And if you don't really want to do it, also listening to like why you don't really want to do it and why you don't really like it, and making like mature choices to change the thing that you're working on. So I think it's just like really listening to yourself as you learn about the process of writing, which all writers are doing, to be like, what works specifically for me.
I totally agree with that. I think like I enjoy writing a lot more now than I actually used to when I was doing it as a hobby, because I figured out what my process is, and every time it feels like I'm never going to write again, like I am going to get over that. And I think often when you have that writer's block, there is like a reason. There's something not clicking with the story, or like you don't quite know what that scene needs to be yet, or like that scene doesn't need to be in there. There's often a reason, and it's actually quite a useful thing.
Specifically about comedy, one thing, because I'm very much a producer and not a writer, what are the things that you've done that have most honed your comedy, and sort of knowing that something's funny on the page?
I think it's
it's funny on the page and will be funny when it's played out as well.
Yeah, it's practice. It's nice to do things where your work can be brought to life. Obviously, that's from like getting a group of people to read the script that you wrote and you listen to it. Obviously, you hear it sounds terrible when that happens, and you learn from it. Being around people who perform comedy and listening and watching a lot of comedy and like being very engaged with it, but it's just volume. And I think the different medium thing is interesting as well, and I would really recommend trying to write across mediums. I definitely made a decision a few years ago where I was like, I am a comedy writer, that is my top line, so I really don't care what the medium is. I have to like treat the medium as the brief and write to the brief. So I would really recommend trying to write like an audio project, because the way that comedy works in audio, and if you engage with listening to lots of comedy audio while you're writing, it works very differently to how visual comedy works, and how live comedy and theatre work is very different to how comedy works on a screen where you can edit it. So I think it's like, it's engaging with that kind of stuff, really watching stuff and thinking about what you like and what you hate, and then trying to get stuff like on its feet and have people. You don't have to have people perform everything. If people have performed some things sometimes, then you can just like play it in your head, I guess. Mm-hmm. But definitely like trying to get people who you find funny and respect to read out your words to see if they work. Not necessarily just the least funny, worst people you know to read it out and massacre it. Sometimes other people are wrong, is my point.
And then I have a question which is kind of a bit selfish from a sort of ex-commissioner and producer point of view. How you feel about notes? Because I was told at the BBC not to give the note unless it will make the difference of over 100,000 views. So I've always found it, which was hard when you're working on BBC Three. But so I've always. Even before that advice, I think Charlie's possibly had notes from me, but I think I'm quite hands-off. And then I spoke to another writer who, when I told them that I was quite hands-off, they said they found that really sort of anxiety-inducing because they feel like I'm not engaged with the thing that they're doing. Whereas from a commissioner and producer point of view, I'm really worried about sanitising things. Everything that comes through me might be sanitised through the same lens, so I kind of want writers to have their own tone of voice. But yeah, I wondered how, across the board, how you feel about notes, whether you like having notes, how you respond to them.
I really, because I love collaborating on like ideas, so I love notes, but it depends on the person given the notes. Because I've had really bad notes not bad notes, but I feel like with every person I meet, everyone speaks a different language. We're obviously speaking English, but you might be speaking a different language to me. Mm-hmm. And I've had it with both acting and writing, where, I'll give an example. I went for an audition one time, and the casting director was like, okay, so I want you to look at me, but don't look at me, look through me, but look behind me. What does that mean? Do you know what I mean? But like another actor probably walked in and she gave those exact same notes and she was like, got it, and probably gave the best performance of her life. Do you know what I mean? It depends on the person. Are we speaking the same language? Mm-hmm. Like, I was so fortunate with Felix Dexter. Like, I loved my sessions with Tanya because I felt like I just got everything that she was saying. But then there have been times where I've gotten notes from someone, I'm like, oh, I don't know what you're telling me to do right now. So I think for me personally, it depends on the person. Mm-hmm. They can be saying the exact same notes, but in a different language.
How about you, Lydia?
Yeah, I think I totally agree with that. I think like the way that I like to receive notes are quite positive and quite like excited about what's good in the piece of work, so that the rest of it can then come up to that level. But having said that, I obviously work in continuing drama, where like notes are kind of anywhere between 9 and 12 pages long, and sometimes the script's only 30 pages long. And so they definitely don't take that view of like being conservative with their notes. And like sometimes for continuing drama, which I don't think is a very good lesson for me as a writer generally, the notes might not be right, but you still have to do them because they came from a certain exec. Mm-hmm. And like the notes aren't the story that you want to tell, but they don't ultimately care about that. It's about the show as a whole. So I think that's been a weird lesson for me to learn as a writer, because to make it in continuing drama, like I have to take those notes, else I'm not getting another episode. But at the same time, then when I'm working on my own stuff, I think I need to be like, but what do I actually want this to be? And am I just trying to please this person? Because that's not the way to make a good script.
Someone told me, I can't remember who it was now, it might come to me, but they said that they always put in an absolute clanger that they know is going to get a note on
throw
it.
The bomb in.
Yeah.
The dead cat, I believe it's called.
Oh, yeah. And then when you get the notes back, you can be like, well, I'll take that out,
yeah, it's
but
a great
I'm going to stand by.
It's a great tip.
It might have been Tom Nina.
It's a great tip. Yeah. I always do it. I think what I would say on notes is like, so the first thing you have to understand is like who's in charge. Because if they're in charge, as in continuing drama, if you're working on the news quiz or whatever, you should just do their notes. Because even if they're wrong, it's their fault. Also, if your name's not going to be the top name on it, don't worry about it, just take the notes. Right? It's like, why stress? When someone gives you notes, you just always go, thank you so much. They were fantastic notes. And then you go away. You don't ever argue back with notes. The real trick to taking notes is, and I didn't invent this, but it's like, what is the actual note that they're trying to say? Sometimes people are just trying to say that they don't have a great idea for what you should do with it, and that is wrong. But what they're trying to say is, I didn't understand it, or it was confusing, or there was something about it that is legitimate, and a legitimate response that you really want to listen to and engage with. So broadly, I'm very pro notes. But I will say the long game, in my opinion, of being a writer and being a writer in this kind of industry is that you are looking to find people who can be on your team who are like the best and most exciting people you've met in your life. So you want to find a producer whose notes excite you, and then together you want to find a commissioner whose notes excite you, and that is how you're going to make your best work. So take the notes, but also like know that from your perspective, the thing you're doing is like looking for the people who are going to understand the thing you're trying to do and who you really respect as well.
Yeah,
I think that's the way.
I was just going to say, like, based off what you were just saying, like, I found that with generals, from the people that read my work, if they were giving notes in the general, not necessarily that they wanted to take it or whatever, but for the future, if I was getting excited from their notes, I was like, oh, I want to work with you.
Yeah.
Because, like, you get what I'm saying and you have notes, but these are exciting me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And we're speaking the same language.
Yeah, and look for those people. I think it's really, that is where you have so little power as a writer, but that is one place where you can have power. If you just think who understands me and who gets what I'm trying to do, or who adds something that's really interesting to this that I couldn't have come up with by myself.
Mm-hmm. What should people be prepared for going to those general meetings that you might have with a production company or a commission, maybe a commissioner or a
Does everyone know what a general meeting is? It's like your first meeting with a production company, with anyone. It doesn't have to be a production company, but it would be like a first meeting. They're not necessarily trying to hire you for anything. You've probably sent them some work to read, or you've got some kind of meeting. It's not a pitch. You're not pitching them something. But
speculative chat.
It's a chemistry test.
Yeah, size each other up.
Is how I would describe it.
And I think one of my tips would be do your research. So obviously, like, look up the shows that they've already done. Try and watch an episode or the film. It does get a bit tedious, especially if you've got like a few that week. You can't watch like 5 films in a week. But just, try and do your research. And the thing I've already mentioned of, like, they might have read one of your specs but have other ideas to take to them as well.
Yeah, I think the BBC Academy did a really interesting thing, which was that they had 8 production companies that were all BBC Studios umbrella production companies, and we all met with all of them for generals, and then got paired with one of them. And why that was really useful was I realised that thing of, like, it was literally like dating, and sometimes I clicked with them and sometimes I didn't, and that wasn't necessarily about like how I prepared for that meeting, or it was just about the people. And in that way it was quite empowering as a writer, because it was like you're both dating. It's not just I'm desperate to impress you, like obviously I am, but sometimes there's people that I just wouldn't have worked that well with, and sometimes there was people where I was like, I really desperately want to do something with you.
Yeah And it is like, it is flirting, really. I think that is a good analogy, because it's like, don't go in and like feel like someone owes you something. I know it is like a sort of, it is a hierarchical industry, so it is annoying when it feels like someone should give you a thing or choose you for a thing, and like that's how it should work. And I feel those feelings as well, but it's just not how it works. It's like people have to be excited by you and in you to want to work with you. But the like real tip I would give for generals is, if someone says, I like this, but I would like it more if you did these notes, you should just do those notes and then send them a new version of it. I feel like 100% of the time I talk to people and they're like, I got some notes and I wasn't sure, and so it's like going down one path a little bit with a script for a person to see if you can do it together is the best possible outcome of that thing. Even if it doesn't work with them, you can have your script back and you can take it somewhere else. But I would say, like, politely follow up with anyone who shows interest in you if you like them as well, and like see if doing the thing they've suggested takes your script to the next place where you would like it to be, and starts that relationship.
And I would say on the other side of the generals, it does feel like speed dating, and especially in development, you're looking for the people that you want to be able to spend a lot of time developing a project with.
Yeah, that you want to work with for ages.
Yeah.